Welcome to How to Live Slow, the podcast where we discuss slow living for the modern woman and help you design an intentionally slower family life. I'm Rachelle Glendon, your personal slow living coach and host of this podcast. I know all about busy, but I love living slow. Enjoy the show. Well, hello and welcome to episode 64 of How to Live Slow. I am really honoured that you've chosen to click on this episode and spend some time with me today. I really do appreciate it. And today I have Sarah Potter, hypnocoach from Dolce Vita, which means the sweet life in Italian. She is a hypnocoach, as I said, and she works with women to feel more confident and create positive habits that stick. So I am so excited to talk with her about all things mindset and living a life with intention and self-awareness, and also, following on from my chat with Joe last week, Sarah and I also chat about setting goals that have meaning, and also looking underneath the original kind of value that you may hold to say, well, what am I trying to achieve when I want that goal? So yeah, You'll love this episode with Sarah. She is such a soft and gentle person, and I'm really, really privileged to have her on the show with us today. And especially because she has created for us a really special self-hypnosis track. So it's a bonus in my new guide. If you go to my website, howtoliveslow.com/slow guides, I've popped a new one up there. It's called The Slow Guide to Working from Home. And what I found was, I've obviously worked from home for 8 or 9 years now. And over time, I've developed some processes with help of people like Sarah and Joe and other, techniques and things through my years of working from home, where I've been able to be the mum that I want to be and work from home and get all the things done that I need to get done, while also remaining living slow and having boundaries around my time. So I've put it all together into this guide. And one thing that I know for sure that's really changed things for me, and I'm sure it's going to change for you as well, is that part of working from home means that there are nights when I work at night after the kids have gone to bed. And that's always been, something that I've needed to do, particularly when I interview people from overseas. 8 o'clock at night is sort of, lunchtime or mid-morning overseas. So that's often when I'm recording podcasts with people from, international guests, and other times where, the kids might be sick, so they're home from school or daycare, which means that I'm working nights once they go to bed to kind of catch up and keep on top of things. But invariably, when you work nights, it's really hard to wind down and disengage from that. And, you've missed out on your Netflix time. So when you go to bed, you've just been working for 2 or 3 hours. So your mind doesn't slow down, and it's really hard to get to sleep. So one of the bonuses inside the working from home guide is a hypnosis track from Sarah. So you listen to it when you're in bed, and it will get you releasing. It's called Releasing Your Day. So it will help you to release your day, set your mind at ease, help you to relax enough to get to sleep, even if, you've been on the screen on your computer for hours right before bed, which, obviously they say you're not supposed to do if you want to have a good night's sleep. But this is kind of a way of counteracting that. So hopefully you can work at night when you need to, but also still get the full night's sleep that you need without feeling really wired but tired when you try to going to bed. So I hope that's helpful for you. If you go over to the website, it's, like I said, it's howtoliveslow.com/slow guides, and it will be one of the ones at the bottom. So do check that out if that's of interest to you, and you can see all the other guides there as well. So there may be others that interest you when you have a look. So enjoy that, and let's meet Sarah. So I'm with Sarah Potter from Dolce Vita. I hope I said that right. It means the sweet life. Hi Sarah, how are you?
Hello, I'm really good, thank you.
Good. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about you and your journey to the sweet life and how that all came about. It's really...
So my journey to the sweet life was a bit of a windy road. Started off my career in marketing, working for a big corporate organisation, and I really loved lots of elements of the work because it was really creative, and I got to travel a lot and work with some really brilliant people. I achieved all my goals quite quickly, and never really felt satisfied doing what I was doing. There was a hollowness in the achievement, because I was really, every time I'd get around to doing my personal development plan every year, I'd be putting goals on there for the sake of putting goals on there, but not really connecting with them. So I went and moved around a bit and I thought, oh, I'll do it for an education organisation. That'll be good because I'm doing something positive for the community, or learning is good. That marketing, that is going to make me feel good, and just nothing really quite hit the spot. And in that adventuring around different elements of marketing, I started to contract, and when I contracted, I would go in and essentially problem solve, because I love getting into sticky challenges, and I would do the stuff that no one else wanted to do because I'm like, oh, that's tricky, I want to get involved in that. And I found that I would end up coaching the teams and not just doing the marketing piece. And I thought, oh, actually, I'm doing this. I probably need to train. And actually, in my transition from going from being a permanent employee to a contractor, I'd had some coaching, and actually the purpose of the coaching was to help me manage the teams that I was in better. And actually part of those conversations, it unfolded, actually I wasn't in the right place. And knowing how powerful having the mirror held up for me was, I was like, I can't just keep using my experience. I need to go and train. And that's where my coaching journey began. Actually, my first coaching session, my coach said to me, you make a really good coach. And I just laughed at him because I was like, I don't want to do that. No, I just need to decide what I want to do. And then as I kind of started consulting independently, it became really clear that that was just a natural gift, that I could see the potential in people and solve problems, whether it was in a project or their career path, without quite quickly, and then help guide them on that journey. So it made sense to train. And then I picked up lots of tools on my way, and in creating my Dolce Vita, which is the Sweet Life, realised actually it was inspiring other people. So pivoted from just doing marketing consultancy to doing coaching and hypnotherapy.
Amazing. Isn't it funny how it doesn't matter where you start, you just, if you're going to be a coach, you get nudged towards that.
Yeah, I honestly thought it was the most hilarious thing. I thought it was preposterous that he was like, literally one of the first things he said was like, you'd make a really good coach. And I just thought, no, that's not in my it's so funny.
We resist these things sometimes. So so what does the Sweet Life mean to you? What does that involve? Tell me a bit more about that, because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, so it evolves over time. So La Dolce Vita is the Sweet Life in Italian, and Italy has always been something that's really important to me. Travel is something that's always been really important to me. So I started off being, what does my sweet life look like? And I would just express this in my journal every day. I lived my La Dolce Vita. Before the business was a thing, I would talk about my La Dolce Vita because I wanted to be my goal was to work for 6 months, travel for 6 months, and spend some of that time in Italy.
Amazing.
And that was it was a real headline. I had no idea how I was going to get to it, but that was what I wrote down in my journal every day. It was work for 6 months, travel for 6 months. And so for me, it's about sitting down and assessing what is it that you really want, and then carving a path to get to it. Because when I first started, I would write down what I really wanted without carving the path, and just be frustrated that I wasn't getting there. And that was where having a container to talk to someone really helped to actually map, to poke me really and map. Because anybody can say, oh, and people often do, right? Oh, I've always wanted to do that. That's really easy to say, but to actually start making tiny steps towards it, that's where it gets uncomfortable. That's the difficult space. So it's taking that time to reflect and really start taking the tiny, really start challenging, what do you really want? Because there's lots of things that we say that we want. So it might be, I've had this with people, I want to spend more time with my family, and you're like, okay, great, doing what? Or is it just a nice thing to say that you want to spend more time with your family? If it's quality time, is that really more time, or is it just better time, And so really getting into the detail of what that actually means, and being kind about the fact that it evolves over time. So travel was really important to me for a really long time, and obviously for the last year that's not been possible. So the goal doesn't go away, but you just use the tools to reassess, and you cycle back round of it constantly, okay, what does it look like now?
I'm glad you said that, because I talk about what is the value underneath your value, because a lot of mums, obviously, it's a lot of people in general say their highest value is their family, but like you said, it's like, okay, well, that's good, but what does that actually mean? Like, so yeah, when you envision like spending that time with your family, what is it doing? How do you feel about that? All of those things, and then maybe that's your real value.
I was much misunderstood when I was traveling a lot, because people would be like, oh, you just travel all the time. And I'm like, well, part of my spending 6 months working and spending 6 months not was I was in my early 30s. A lot of my friends had kids. And if I wasn't around during the day, I wouldn't see them because their kids were at the age where they don't go out in the evening. So it was
Yeah.
like, oh, can you come to mine for dinner? I'm like, yeah, great. But it would be nice to see you in daylight and also get to know their tiny people, because that's a part of their life. And that was really important to me. And my brother has lived overseas for much of the last 10 years as well. And he's got 2 children. So it was really important for me to have the flexibility to be able to go and see them. So I go to Canada for a month was part of my 6 months to see them, and have the flexibility to be able to completely surrender to my niece and nephew and be like, okay, what do you want to do? It's their agenda. When they're probably horribly spoiled as a result, because when they see me, I just do whatever they want to do. Want to go to the library? Brilliant. Want to play on the water sliding slip or whatever it is in the garden? Brilliant. I don't see them very often. I wanted to, for me, that freedom was, yeah, I'll do a trip on the front and back end of seeing them, but when I see them, they really get to spend proper time and know that I really care about them, because it's not very often. So but people are, oh, you just travel all the time, and I'm like, well, I do work as well when I go, and I'm going to see my family. And for me, creating this flexibility, getting some of the travel out of my system was something that I wanted to do, but then creating the flexibility for future family life was what this was all about, because freedom is an important value to me. And part of the reason why I started contracting was because I looked at my peers and my managers in corporate, and as much as the work was quite interesting, actually they sacrificed so much, and they'd be passing their partners across the Atlantic, like flying, like there was a lot, and I didn't want that life. Basically, I wanted to create something different for myself, where I could actually be happy and have time to spend with any tiny people that I have in the future, and any tiny people that are in my life right now. And yeah, but I kind of, yeah, I don't think people didn't expect it from a single woman. It's like, oh, you're just traveling. I'm like, no, there's a purpose here.
Yeah.
There's a much bigger vision.
It's funny as well when you think about like doing a different kind of life. Like my friend and I we've been doing this coast trek on a Monday morning, and we sort of laugh at like, oh, we're semi-retired, because we're doing something that you wouldn't expect, someone in their 30s to be doing on a Monday morning. But I mean, she works nights and I work other times, same thing. I work nights sometimes as well, and other days. And it's just, I mean, so cool to be able to create, like I said, your sweet life. It's so amazing to lead by example, and then, but also interesting to witness people's expectations or perceptions.
Honestly, I just got shivers even just thinking. I had so much judgment from people. I had so
Yeah.
much people saying, because one of my big first, I call them kind of lifestyle experiments, was I'd had this longing. I'd worked in international teams for a really long time. That was part of my kind of, I've kind of nudged like, oh, okay, I work in marketing. I do international marketing because then I get to travel. Oh, that's not enough. Okay, what next? What next? What next? And in those teams, I wanted to be on the ground. I didn't want to be just flying in and flying out. So I got a visa for Australia, and I moved to Australia for a year, and people were like, I'm so worried about you. What are you going to do? Like, I don't know, but I know I've got loads of good experience. I've got a couple of mates down there. I have somewhere to stay for the first few weeks. It'll be fine. But they were so stressed and so worried, to the point that I think they expected me to not go, and I had to have a conversation with one person and say, like, I really appreciate your care, and I know this is coming from a good place, but I'm not worried, so you don't need to be worried. Like, I really appreciate you expressing that, but kind of package it up and send it back to them with love, because it was a lot. There were some quite intense conversations, and also like, oh, you're just on holiday all the time, or you're just, why are you off on a Monday morning to go swimming or whatever? Because I used to love being able to go and swim outdoors in this gorgeous pool near where I lived I think it was in Windsor. I used to love being able to just walk there and swim in the middle of the day. That was my Dolce Vita, is to be able to do that, because I love that. Gives me life. And they were just like, "Oh, you're so lazy. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
you know,
You're breaking the rules. You're not hustling. You're not working 20,000 hours a week.
me too. Or people, I went back and contracted at places that I'd worked before, and they were like, "How do you cope not knowing what you're going to be doing next month?" And I'm like, "Is this when you're not?" The amount of money that people spend when they're working to cope with the fact that they're working in places that they don't want to be is quite shocking. Like, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. All the things that we do to medicate our lives. There's a book. What's it called? I can't remember the name. There's a book. What's the name of the book?
I think I know the one that you mean.
I think we might have talked about it before, but you work out I need to have a glass of wine every day, and the holiday when you take all of that stuff out, that's actually numbing how you feel about, the stress that work gives or whatever. The amount of money we think we need versus what we actually need is vastly different. Your money or your life, is that what that book is called?
Yeah. Yeah. And all the clothes that you have to wear, like, especially if you work in corporate and travel.
Like,
mm-hmm.
tights are expensive, right?
Yeah.
It's all these crazy things. When you take all of that away, the amount of money you actually need is not how much most people think. So it was quite fun to experiment and be like, actually, I don't, something always comes up, and it's always been fine. And yeah, there was a lot of projection from people.
Yeah. Oh, totally. It's so interesting to from a social point of view, like, like all the things that you think you need, like you said, like all that medication that we give ourselves to cope with. It's like, I deserve this $2,000, I don't know, holiday, bike, dress, artwork, something. I don't know, because I've had to do this. What about if you take away the thing that you have to, air quotes, do, and find something you want?
Yeah. My contentment was being able to go to a 10 a.m. Pilates class and have a swim, like, because I could go and work in the afternoon in a cute cafe somewhere and
amazing.
Get more done. That's one thing that I really noticed going back to places that I used to work, because I would go and do little really focused contracts every now and then. I don't really do them anymore, but how little time it took me to do stuff, because I'd got so used to just doing everything by myself. I'm like, I don't need all of that time. It was really interesting.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, when you've got your own business, your time, it takes a little bit of time to get used to being the master of your time, but it's amazing how productive you can be and how much you can get done in so much less work time. So when people say, "Oh, you only work 20 hours a week," like, yeah, but I'm actually working for those 20 hours a week, not faffing about making another cup of tea.
Well, I do that, and it's kind of like I go off to meet a friend, and
yeah,
it's richer.
So funny. We're getting off on a total tangent here, but it's all it is actually relevant though, because it is about, like, that's what slow living is. It's the same thing as creating the sweet life. It's like, well, what do you actually want? What about not worrying about the external validation? What would make you feel good inside and living your value?
I have my moments of being like, oh my gosh, like this year. So I started off as an apprentice in corporate, and if I'd stayed, I would have been in that company for 20 years this year.
Oh.
But I remember going into a meeting, and this is when maybe I was 5 or 6 years into my career, and this woman came in and she said, "Oh, it's my 25th anniversary today. I've been here for 25 years." And I just remember thinking, oh, I don't think I want to be that person, because as much as you could do lots of different roles in that company, I knew that there was something more in me that I wanted to go and share and create. And there's a lot of great stuff about that world. Totally. I got loads of good training experience, amazing friends, a lot of whom I still, am in touch with. but just the structure for me was too rigid and it didn't allow me to really identify with the values that are really important to me. So
Yeah, I feel like if you stay at a job for a certain period of time, it's fear. You can't leave. Like you get so indoctrinated. It's like never moving house. Like, the longer you stay in a house, the harder it is to imagine ever not living there.
And I think having worked in marketing, it was quite a challenge for me to find my voice in my business, because I was used to speaking in the voice of other businesses. And it sounds really weird. Even now, sometimes when I'm typing things, I find myself, because I would have to create copy or advertise, or, I was always checking copy for all these countries all over the world, and all the different countries have different rules and regulations. Like I think New Zealand was always the most strict, so we had to be really careful, and then there would be like degrees of what we could say. And I still find myself now like caveating things. I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to speak that language, and it's not that I'm completely wild, and I can be really authentic with how I am showing up, but it still takes a long time to train that out. It gets ingrained, and I just felt really uncomfortable. But for me, from a lifestyle point of view, I wanted something different. I wanted more flexibility and freedom, and I wanted to be around for my family in the future. And I'd say, I'll do it when. And it got to the point where I was just like, I need to take control of this, because at the point at which family comes along, it's going to be so much harder to do. So why don't I just do it now? So easy to say, like, well, I don't need to do that yet because they're not here yet. Am I mad? Like, am I really going to, is it start a business with a baby? Like, if I haven't done it before, like, have a play around first. See how it works.
Yeah. Good choice.
It was just it seems like such a silly realization, but that was the moment at which it's like, don't keep putting this off, because if you keep putting it off until you get to that point, you probably won't do it, because it will be so much harder. Just do it now. Like, there's the playground to do it, and it's allowed me to build in these like nudges and make little steps as I go along, because people that have not known me that long are like, oh, you made all these radical changes. And I didn't really. I went from being a corporate employee to doing fixed term contracts to doing day rate to then upping sticks and starting my own business on the other side of the world. Like it was a progression. It wasn't like I threw everything in the bin all at once, and I think for most people that doesn't work.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, that there's a broken belief that, overnight success, that you quit your job and go all in. It takes a long, long time.
I think the only people that do that when there's like a real crisis, and actually who wants to get to that point? It's not and I get that, and it makes sense to make a revolution, but I am much more about evolution and saying, okay, what's the next tiny step to get towards that? Like, how can you bring that into your reality right now? Because there's always a little way. So like, I really want a pool in my, I call it the homestead, the house, the vision house kind of thing. So I signed up for a gym that's got an outdoor pool, because that's me. And then I would have a little mantra like, I'm living my Dolce Vita, that I would just think when I was swimming. So there's little ways that you can bring things into your reality.
Yeah, that is such a good way of doing it. That's like you're swimming in the pool, that, rather than spending all the money on the house right now, that's not possible. Yeah.
Like, there's little ways, because you can, shut your eyes and just imagine that it's your own pool. It doesn't need to be, it's got to be realistic, right? There's stretch, but our brain, if I start saying, I'm going to do that next week, it's not possible. So actually, what is possible this week that can make me get into the state of readiness and openness to it? Because some change is really challenging. Like, I remember knowing absolutely that moving to Australia was the right thing for me, but packing up my house, I packed it up to rent it out, and like going to all these places for the last time, leaving my contract, all this stuff. I cried a lot. And I remember a friend of mine said, maybe you shouldn't do it because you're crying. And I was like, I'm just crying because it's the end of a chapter. And I'm just grieving that chapter. I know that this is the right thing to do, but it's so easy to just shut it down because you're like, oh, yeah, I am sad that, I'm leaving that safe space, but I'm going to another one that's exciting. So it's all good. It's just part of the process.
So true. Yeah, good point. So I'm glad that we're talking about this now, because my next question about nudges, and I guess it's kind of, I think of nudges as like your version of how to manifest things, but putting the intention behind it and actually doing the things to move you towards it. But can you explain a little bit more? I love this concept and I love the way that you frame it. Explain nudges to us.
Nudges are magic, or they feel like magic, because I get all my clients to sit down and really think about what their big vision is up front and really get into like, what do they really want versus what they think they should want, which is often vastly different, like to the point that we made before about, I want to spend more time with my family. Well, okay, what does that actually look like? Is that every Saturday afternoon you go for a walk? Like, what is it? Like, getting really clear on that. And then oftentimes there's something in that that feels really wildly far away. There's some stuff that you can get to super quick, and we facilitate that. But then that can be really overwhelming. And a lot of people really resist that process, because I worked with someone once that everything she was saying to me sounded like she really wanted to work for herself, but she'd had a foundation in the past, and she was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, God, I think that you do. Yeah. Everything that she expressed was that, but it was just overwhelming her. And you're like, okay, well, what's the next tiny step that you can take? So the nudges are all about identifying that next tiny step. And it might not even take you to that original, but it will take you somewhere to help you explore what you really want out of that, because it might be the essence of that. So for her, she loved founding things, but didn't necessarily want to be the head of it. So she's working in like joint ventures for an organization, so she goes and finds people, puts them together and makes magic happen that way, but she can just walk away without having the responsibility. Great, like she found her magic in it, but there was a process of, I think it's the personal stuff and we kind of nudge at, well, is it really the personal stuff, or is it not the fulfillment here, or is it like having an explore and then putting in the tiny steps around each of the areas? So whether it's, a lot of people come to me with personal goals linked to like a work outcome, because it's the personal stuff that holds us back in that space.
Totally.
Energy levels, for example, is often related to sleep hygiene, movement, etc. And that's why we don't show up at work how we want to. So I'll look at, okay, well, what is it that gives you life? What is that? So how can we make that happen? And some of the nudges are so crazy small that you think, oh, what's the point? I know old me would have been like, that's really extra. Why do you bother with that? Like, that's really tiny. Why doesn't it make any difference? Getting your kit ready. So we got home from a swim earlier, and I take all my kit out straight away and get it ready for the next time. I'm not swimming for 2 days, but I know that if I don't get ready now, it's just another excuse to not go. And I know that I'll have more energy on Wednesday, having organised that for myself today. So that's a tiny nudge that helps me show up better at work. It's all these little acts of love for ourselves to set ourselves up for the best outcome, really.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, totally. I think it's like absence makes the heart grow fonder is this thing that's coming around for me at the moment. Around so many of us are like, oh, I've got to work. I'll just do that self-care later. I'm letting the boundaries bleed into dropping it away. Suddenly you find all you're doing is working and you hate it, even though you love it. Whereas it's like, well, if you keep it in the container of the time that you allocate so that you can do all the other things that make life good, you enjoy it more and you look forward to getting back to work. Is that kind of what you...
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely it helps you find the balance, because otherwise what are we doing it for? Like, there's no point if all we're doing is slaving to these things. Like, it just doesn't work. And it's, oh no, I need to do that, I should do it. So I signed up for this online exercise program. It was good for me a few months ago. It's not good for me right now. Like, I'm going to cancel that this week. It doesn't suit what I need right now. Like, that's fine. I needed that nudge right then, and I need something different. It's such a seasonal thing as well, right?
Yeah.
I want to be outside now. I want to be out on my bike. I'm loving walking to the pool. I don't want to be in my basement doing HIIT.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And it's just not the same. So actually, what do you need to nudge you into a better state? And it's not just action. It might be like, I can see there's post-it notes all over my walls. It's probably not a good podcast notifier, but what is the nudge that you need to get you doing what you need to be doing? We all need reminders. It might be phone, notifications. It might be putting a sign on inside. I have my vision board on the inside of kitchen cupboard because I don't know, I open it every day. It was like, where do I go every day? Okay, yeah, there's one there. There's one there. There's one like anywhere where I am often.
So my final question is then, like, talking about all of these little things we can do to support us, it really comes down to, like, life's journey. It's not really about getting somewhere. Like, that's what we're all so focused on. And I feel like that's maybe where we're getting it a bit wrong. It's like, I'll be happy when I get to this point, when I've achieved this goal. But it's actually more to do with like who you become in the process of working towards that, right?
Yeah.
And this seems to be, like, I've known you for a while now, and I see like that's kind of what your whole thing is. That's your life's work now. What are the tools, like, let's talk about that, but I also want to know, like, what are some of the techniques you help your clients with most to do this stuff? That was a big question, sorry.
Just a couple to sign off. It definitely is about the journey. Like, we imagine that it's just going to be this, like, oh, I'm going to do these really cool things and it's going to be really fun. But actually, our brains are programmed for safety and comfort and familiarity, right? From a primal point of view. So and this is why I advocate the nudges, because if you do things gradually, then your brain might resist, but it's not going to set off all the red flags, because it will do that even on stuff that you really, really want. We have to acknowledge them and celebrate them, because if we don't celebrate these things, like, it's all part of the journey. And if we don't honor them, then where we get to doesn't have a value. It doesn't feel as good. It doesn't really mean anything. And it's not, I've done some really cool things. It's not all been easy. In fact, a lot of it hasn't. And that's what's made it so fulfilling to get to the plate, to try the things, because a lot of stuff was not quite how I expected it to be, for example. And that's also part of the journey, right? Like, and that's part of the richness of unveiling, okay, like, well, what is it about that I really want and why? And then moving into the how that comes to life. And a lot of, like, one of the really powerful classic ways to get to that in self-reflection is journaling. Like, I advocate all of my clients to have a journaling practice. I will give them tailored journaling prompts and tasks to do, particularly in the early weeks of working together, to really start to, like, I guess, pull the thread of, when you pull the thread on it, or the yarn on a jumper, it's like, let's just unravel this and see what's going on here. Because often, as I said, like, we have a lofty vision, but then getting the detail of that, we need to know as much detail as possible to give the GPS a destination. If we don't give a destination, like, you wouldn't go on a trip without putting a destination into a map or a GPS, I do love an old school map, but you don't go for a walk without deciding where you want to go. Like, you might not know the route, but you know where you want to go. So it all helps with that. So journaling is really helpful, because sometimes once you start to really get into it and engage the body in the process, because the mind will tell us all sorts of stuff. You can come up with the best idea, and then your brain will instantly be like, oh no, well, what about this, that, and the other? But if you actually engage your body, get it out on paper, and see how you feel about it versus what you think about it, there's a different process that happens. There's a different chemical reaction. And that's really helpful for clients to get it out. Hypnosis is magical in getting the subconscious on their side. So 95% of our decisions are made by our subconscious. Like, it's a teeny tiny bit that's doing, we think that we have all this, we do have a lot of control, but if we just make tiny changes here, it really helps to unlock a lot and seed things into that subconscious mind, get that on our side. Then this is where things start to feel magical and sweet, because actually we're influencing that 95% when actually we're used to just playing in this tiny space. Things start to move a lot quicker, but that doesn't happen on its own. It has to happen with action. It has to happen with the conscious thought as well, which is why I kind of call the practice the nudges, because these three things on their own don't really work. But if you pull them all together, it's like this magical call. It feels magical because everything gets a lot easier. And I think like movement is the other thing. It's like you have to be taking action on things. Like it's so easy to say, like you said before, like, oh, I'll do it when, and this was my thing, like way back in the day. I'll set up my life how I want it, when this happens, when that happens, when I've got more money, when more time has passed, when I have a partner. Actually, let's just go create it now, because we never have more time. There's always more money, but there's never more time. And that's really driven me. Like, I wanted the freedom to spend time with my niece and nephew when they're tiny, because that time doesn't come again. So it's like having taken the movement, whatever that is, and taking the action is really important. They don't stand alone.
Yeah, amazing. So much goodness in what you just said. And yeah, hypnosis is something that it really does change, doesn't it? Like it really does have, like I'm just starting to get my understanding around what it really is and how it works. But I know that I've got some hypnosis tracks that I listen to on an app, and yeah, so it's that self-reflection. So journaling or anything, just like even reflecting on, celebrating what you've achieved is another thing that I think, like you were saying at the start, like when you don't you never really get to the goal that you're trying to achieve, because you never, even if you do get to it, because you're not used to celebrating the little things, you'll never really acknowledge that you achieve that, and you'll just move on to the next one. And it's just like a never ending grind, right?
Because growth becomes addictive. Like,
yeah.
Like it's a habit. It's a habit that we form, right? It's like, well, how can you just get into the flow of wanting to make things better, and what an amazing flow to be in, right? Versus the stagnancy. But we've got to celebrate stuff, because otherwise what's the point? And it has to be a conscious habit that we create, because it's again, like I remember the first time I'd had lots of really high level goals and then not really broken it down. And the first time I really went into the detail of it, I think was 2014. And I wrote all these things down. And then at the end of the year, I was feeling really like, I haven't achieved anything. What am I doing with my life? Blah, 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 blah. And I sat down on the 28th of December and went through it all. I'd achieved 75% of what I had written down, which is pretty good. A lot of it was stretch stuff. And it really just blew my mind on the power of putting pen to paper, because in my head I'd had a really crappy year. I hadn't done anything, hadn't achieved anything. And actually that act of sitting down for what was probably a couple of hours at the start of the year and then an hour at the end of the year, and really looking at what really happened versus the story that was going on in my brain was just such a game changer. And now it's a regular practice. I write letters to myself in the future all the time, as well as having the journaling practice to activate. Okay, well, what do I want it to? What do I need to remember, or what do I want to say? Sometimes it's a celebration. Sometimes it's remembering a painful moment as well. I've got one to open on Friday. I've got no idea what it is, but sometimes it is I need to get this out, and writing it down helps, and knowing that future me will remember that moment, because that will make that future moment better, if that makes sense. It's just another way to acknowledge stuff. So I have lots of creative ways that I journal and bring things. There's a box of those letters.
I love it. What a great idea. Might have to start trying that. I just watched a TED talk by the guy who wrote Storyworthy, and he said he thinks start a spreadsheet and just write one sentence about what happened every day, just to start noticing the stories of your life. And I think that's quite a similar process. He said most people don't do it. You'll spend 2 hours watching TV overnight, but you won't write down just what happened every day. And if it's a good sentence that you wrote, you can look at it in 10 years' time and remember that day. And I think that's...
it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, that's the... Da, 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 and then the feelings fall out, and that's activates the memory. It's really powerful. I started doing it because my journey to Oz was really long, so I started writing these letters as a way to remember it. And when I got there, I was like, oh, this is actually quite a nice practice. I wanted to remember certain things, and yeah, I started trying all sorts. Sometimes it's a really amazing memory, and sometimes it's that you need to remember this painful moment too, because like, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget all elements of the journey. 80-year-old me wants to. I want to sit there when I'm 80 and read them all, basically.
Yes, definitely. Amazing. What a great idea. I love it. So before we say goodbye, first of all, thank you so much for sharing all of this amazing, it's such a great chat. I love it. I love all the intentional life stuff. Where can we find you online, and what is going on in the Dolce Vita life? Wait, did I? Oh, ATM machine.
So I spend quite a lot of time on Instagram at La Dolce Vita Coach or ladolcevita.co.uk, and yeah, so I have a free retreat every month at the moment, which is a beautiful way for people to like see what it's like to work with me. We get together every day for 5 days, and I share some of the journal prompts that I work with people on. I'm going to do some workshops in the next couple of months as well. So my main launch of my year is in July, when my birthday is. So there's going to be a La Dolce Vita workshop in July. So yeah, there's a couple of ways, really fun ways that people can start to activate their La Dolce Vita.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
You.
That's it for another episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you'd like to connect further, the show notes from today's episode, including all the social links and free resources, are over on my website, howtoliveslow.com/podcast. Have a beautiful week ahead, and I'll speak with you again soon.